Hello, my friends. We are back in Los Angeles. Couple weeks off. Was in New York, was in London, back in LA for a bit, and happy to be here. I'll grab John in a second. How's everybody doing? What's up, Spider? I'll see you on Friday. What's up, everybody? It's nice to be back in Los Angeles. It's significantly warmer here than either New York or London. And I'm really already enjoying it. All right, let me grab John. Let's just get right to it.
Accept. Hey, there we are.
No connection issues this time.
No connection issues. I got.
Dude, you look good.
Hey, thank you. Somebody just said I look so different when I shave.
15 years younger.
I'm a youthful. I got youthful energy right now, man. It's been a
what makes
journey.
You change it up? Like, what makes you just go? It's time.
Impulse or somebody whose opinion I enjoy, who's like, you should do the thing, and I'm like, sure.
Yeah,
you know, when I basically let my hair grow for, I don't know, 18 months or something over the whole pandemic. And then at one point just shaved it all impulsively.
You look good.
Hey, thanks, man. Hey, what up, Tizio? I was just talking to him. He's at an Atmos studio downtown. I'm going to go try to see him later. Oh, yeah.
Miller's, the Atmosphere.
Mike Miller joined as well. I'm gonna try to go see him later today, but I've still never actually been in an Atmos room.
Oh, dude. Got it. It sounds amazing in there. It's crazy.
Yeah, it's exciting. I was just talking to our buddy Dale Becker as well. Seems like Atmos. There's no Atmos questions this week, but I'm definitely gonna dig in a little bit and see what's going on. How you doing, man?
I'm doing good. I told you like last week, but I caught some sort of bug, so I've been sick with not COVID for about 10 days. So if I cough, I'm sorry, guys.
I'm sorry to hear
but
that.
I feel fine. I played tennis this morning for the first time, exercising in 10 days, and I feel fine. I'm just coughing still.
Nice, man. Nice. Well, I'm glad you're feeling better. It is nice to know
you can get sick and not get COVID, though.
I guess. There's more things that can get you.
Yeah, I mean, it's good to know that you can just be normally sick, and because people are terrified if you're coughing. You're like, I don't have COVID. It's fine.
Yeah.
But I'm good.
Absolutely. Nice, man. Well, we have.
I was pretty stoked. I wanted to start off because we didn't get to do it Tuesday because we were off, but Tuesday was Grammy nomination day. And I wanted to just talk about how many young people and peers got nominated this year, and it feels like something shifted in my perspective on the Grammys, where like we ask, like, what is a Grammy? What does it even mean? Like, it doesn't really mean anything. Like, it is nice as a milestone to remind you that hard work can maybe earn an accolade, and your mom or dad could be proud, or your brother and sister, or your friends, or whatever. But for me, it was like, a bunch of young people got acknowledged this year, and obviously the same old people, still killing it, and 3 decades in, getting nods, and I'm sure it means a lot to them as well. But a lot of friends, a lot of peers, a lot of people my age, your age, and younger, killing it this year and working really hard, and I wanted to shout that out on this episode today because we didn't get to do it last week.
Yeah, a lot of friends. I think a lot of people. You got some recognition, didn't you?
I got two official nominations this year.
And I know Tizio's in there. I know Kean is in there. I think friends of the lives and friends who have not been on lives but are our peers. I think it's great for people to be
Mark and Raul OG Volta, like, killing it. They got so many this year, and there's a lot. Rory too.
I know that they opened up to songwriters for some of the credits. So songwriters are part of the Grammy nominations for albums. So if an album like the Bieber album, where there's lots and lots of people who have writing on it, everybody gets acknowledged, which is cool. And I know they opened up the nominations from 5 to 10 for a lot of things. So it's just a lot of people getting to feel the love and feel the acknowledgement, which is nice.
I had a funny close one. The Leon Bridges album is nominated for best R&B, and as a mix engineer, a lot of people don't know this, but if you've had over 50% of the running time mixing, you don't get officially nominated, meaning you're not invited for that one, but you get a trophy if it wins because you mixed over 50%. Or producer, same thing.
Right.
And because one of the songs I mixed was 6 minutes and 40 seconds, I mixed 20 minutes of a 36-minute album. So I will get a trophy if it wins. versus a certificate, which is super cool because like that's one of those I've been saying it my whole life, and Talk and Khalid was the first Grammy nomination. It's for an album and a song I love. Like I loved working on it. I love the team, everything behind it. In a perfect world, all the Grammy nods would come from things that I feel that strongly about. And that's how I feel about being involved in Leon. I'm such a fan of Leon. Like I cared so much about every moment that I spent on that project. And, it would be nice to win for something that you feel so connected to, from artist from fan to the creative process of.
Yeah, that's cool, man. Yeah. Well, congratulations to everybody who,
thanks. Yeah. Congrats everybody.
Got nominated. We have a backlog of lots of great questions since we've taken 2 weeks off, and 2 weeks ago we just talked about potential for future live things and other events and things, which I want to talk to you about as well now that I'm back in LA.
Yep.
Is there a loud...
Yeah, so I was about to say, so I have a bathroom being redone in my house, so they're cutting tiles.
Nice little white noise in the
Sorry,
background.
It's going to come in and out.
I just want to make sure it wasn't on my end. That's all good. So it would be good to get into a few things. There were a couple of quick questions which I wanted to cover because a number of people asked about it. Verbana asked, any good resources or people to learn about mastering? Hard to know what's good info out there. By the way, it is really hard to know what's good info. You and I have touched on it a little bit, but I was talking to Dale Becker, great mastering engineer, about doing a live. So I think we will do one.
Just do one with Dale.
I'm going to hang with him at some point in the next week or so. And then I think I'll have him come on a live and we'll just do a full episode on mastering. So
I would love to do that. We should do a full episode on mastering, and then we should do a 3-way with Dale's and my relationship for the last 12 years and how we work together and how we develop that connection working together.
That'd be great.
That would be I think that would be interesting for people to hear the relationship between the mixer and the master engineer, and the growth that shaped up to be and take on. But you should have him on first to give people a bit of a background of what that role really is.
That sounds great. And how's the reception there in the chat? Because I feel John seems to be cutting in and out. Are you seeing me full?
Yeah. You go in and out too, but I'm seeing you mostly.
Okay. How's the chat? Maybe people can chime in on the chat, see how it is. Let's see. Atsu asked about, saw a pic of John's attack wall setup. How does it compare to a normal room? We don't need to get into what the attack wall is really, but is there some particular resource? Like there's somebody specifically making the attack wall. I just wondered if I can give somebody a resource to Google.
Yeah. Acoustic Science Research, ASR, I mean.
Acoustic Science Research. So check that out. It's basically a way to build a room within a room. And there's some theories about why it's good and why people use it. And obviously your room sounds great. So without us getting into like,
it works for me. I'm not disillusioned by the fact that it could be better up here, but there's no reason to change how it sounds. And I've talked about this with Spider and Rory, from Unfuck. There's no real big reason to change how it sounds up here now because it's working and I do hundreds of songs a year. So no one's pissed at things. So could it be better than an attack wall? Most likely, with thicker panels that are, a bit more absorptive and less reflective on the opposite side. The thing about the attack wall is it's absorptive on one side and reflective on the other side. And there's reasons for that. There's bits and pieces inside that theoretically cut sound waves and redisperse them in all sorts of, magical ways. Who the fuck knows if there's a better way or not to do it. But from the rooms that I've heard that I've been into, from people's like bedrooms to converted garages, I like my room the best that I've experienced. So I still do stand behind that it could, it could benefit certain people depending on your budget and flexibility. And do you want to move, take it with you? I still stand behind it to some degree, but if I were to do it again, I probably wouldn't have it. And I would have Unfuck do my room and build panels.
I'm going to see those guys on Friday too. They're going to come by this spot I'm at for a few months. And I think we've talked for a long time about doing a live with the two of them. They are experts in building studios in temporary, permanent setups, crazy rooms, whatever. So I'm going to chat with them, and we're going to try to do a live where we just talk about just giving tips and thoughts on how people can build home studios and what they can do, and at various budget levels and all of that. So we'll, hey, what's up, Spider, in the chat there? We'll have a whole episode about studio building, home studio building. The
thing to note about the attack wall and how it works in my world is that the back wall from my mix position is 80 feet. So there are no real low-end issues that have to be combated that an attack wall cannot do. So the attack wall in a small room will not be the same as it is in my giant loft space. So the way that I have it set up, I feel lucky that it translates the way it does. I don't think buying an attack wall and putting it into a bedroom is going to be the way forward. Because you have more low-end issues to manage that the attack wall does not handle. It doesn't go down to the low-end frequencies. Even just seeing the cylinders that are on the stands, they don't go all the way to the floor. They're not thick enough to absorb proper low-end. So it works despite that because of my space is so big. So just
and even though those things, and even though those things are big cylinders, they're totally different concept, design, and intention from the tubular bass traps, which I've used, Eric Valentine's used, other people's used, which are actually specifically made for trapping bass. It's a totally different thing, even though they're both cylinders. It's a whole different idea.
Yes, thanks for clarifying that. Yes.
Yeah. So people always ask about that. So yeah. So one more time, the company is what?
Acoustic Science Research.
Okay, so they make the attack wall. So some people can just Google that and check that out.
They design acoustics for NASA and really high order industrial. Like I'm sure they're consulted for movie theaters and office buildings and structural, even restaurants and industrial spaces. Like this is it's a higher level thing than only for music recording.
Yeah, cool. So I'd say just Google that. Couple other quick ones. Ryan asked, how do A-list records come out so loud on streaming services without sounding super limited? I would say, Ryan and anyone else curious about that, we did an hour or maybe 2 hours just on the topic of loudness. And so much of that is not about your limiter or anything like that. Those are sort of finishing touches. It's really about gain structure and about arrangement and carving out frequencies and mixing and produce. Like it's a very complicated topic, or not complicated, but there's just lots of factors. So if somebody in the chat wants to can tell us which episodes were on loudness, but if you just go on the YouTube, just Google LiveWithMattRad loudness, and John and I talked, I think for 2 hours specifically about this topic of what does it mean to make things loud, the appearance of loudness, all of that. It's a really important topic, and at some point we may do like a part 3, but we did 2 hours on loudness, so definitely check that out. It's also a good overview about whether you're a producer or a mixer or whatever, a mastering engineer, the idea of what makes things loud and what makes things feel loud, which is really what loudness is. Loudness is measurable, but loudness is also apparent loudness. What makes things feel exciting, feel clear, feel loud by comparison. So the answer to that is much longer than the 2 hours we spent on it, but I think there's a lot of good info there. There's a question that gets asked periodically, and Hex asked it. How much did you guys charge when you were first starting, and how fast/often did it go up? I'll give a couple of thoughts and then maybe you can do it. I mean, the reality is most of the things I did starting out, the charge was zero because I was just making the best stuff I could with the people around me, and none of us had any money. And then if and when, episode 36 and 37 for loudness. Thank you. And if and when things made money, then you deal with it as you go. I think the first time I charged $10 an hour in my parents' basement to some local thing. And then I moved it up to 15, and I was making serious money at age 15 or something like that at $15 an hour. But, these things are, these questions are hard to answer because it depends on exactly what your role is. It depends what your relationship is with people. So much of this, even, and we've talked about this a bit before because we did a couple hours on business. Even today, I mean, it's different a bit different for you because you essentially do one role over and over and over. You have a rate. You do some things pro bono, but you have a rate. And maybe occasionally if you do a whole album, there'll be a discount, but you pretty much have a rate. But for me, I do so many different roles, from writing and producing from scratch to finishing co-production to mixing to executive producing. And so my deals, I have like a rate that is like, here's the major label rate if you want me to produce and mix a song. But there's always some combination of roles that gets negotiated, and sometimes it's less money and more points, and so, you know, it changes dramatically. So I think the one thing I would say is what has always upped my rate throughout my career, and I imagine this is the same for you, is when you make really good work that other people love, all of a sudden you're more in demand. And then that's when you say, okay, in order to do all this, you know, you don't generally want to start out with people who have no money and you make stuff and then all of a sudden be like, the next project is twice as much just because. But if you start having serious success and you have, and whether that's you make the best local records or whether you get your first thing that streams a few million or whatever, you know, these benchmarks, when other people respond to your work, and whether that's fans or peers, that's generally when you can sort of solidify and up rates. I don't know, you got thoughts on the topic?
Yeah, I mean, it's also on that side of it, there's an analog in wine, right? Like, there's wine gets more expensive based on demand and people writing about the fact that this wine is the best wine. And then there's supply issues. You know, a great producer of wine, like a great producer of music, will bottle less bottles per year just to make sure the quality is even throughout. Timbaland doesn't do hundreds of songs a year. He might do 2 albums in his prime during that year. And those albums in the 90s and early 2000s were some of the best records to ever come out because he spent his time doing it. So based on the amount of time you're engaging in the process, that's warranted of a higher rate because of higher time investment, cost investment, points. Like that's when you're getting to that level of being sought after and, you know, booked almost every day and in demand and everyone wants to work with you. But before that, it's mostly free.
What has your trajectory been with mixing and charging for mixes and that sort of thing? Can you think of the benchmarks when I'm sure that when you get nominated for a Grammy and you have a hit song, your rate goes up some amount, but like,
so start from the beginning. Benchmarks? The beginning was all free in my garage doing local bands. And then when I built a studio with my dad when I was 19 in Long Island, for those 5 years, we had a day rate. The day rate included me. So I was probably making the equivalent of 50 cents or negative money per hour. I was actually working.
So this is engineering, not just mixing, but
engineering,
house engineer.
House engineer. And then when everyone was like, oh, this is done, like, and I would say, no, who's mixing? They would say, oh, wait, aren't you going to mix? I was like, I don't know. I'm not a mix engineer. I don't know how to mix. Like, no way. They're like, oh, well, we don't have any more money. So then I would spend hours and hours and I would learn how to mix. So I learned how to mix based on necessity because no one had the budget to spend more than whatever my day rate was, which was probably $500 a day, which means I probably made $20 of that. My dad would like throw me.
So the studio was $500, but it was a family business type thing.
Yeah, so like, just my dad would just throw me cash now and then to like go eat Mamoon's falafels in Manhattan. You know, I didn't really like spend any money on anything but food. So I mean, yeah, and they were at that time they were $250. Now they're up to $450, which is hilarious. So you know, just throwing me cash here and there, but I never got like handed a wad where like this is amazing.
When did you start actually being like, I have a per song?
Never on Long Island. Never. That didn't happen until I got to LA. And started working with Tony. Tony came up with a fee after we've heard the Tony story. It's on some episode how I met him and how he asked me to move in across the hall.
How Matt and John met their mentors, I think is the name of the clip or something like that. You can find it on the Clips channel.
Yeah. So, you know, YouTube. After he said, you know, move in across the hall, I was like, dude, I can't afford that and my apartment in LA with the work I got. He's like, don't worry. Like I'll get you work. And then we came up with a rate that made sense for him to have me, you know, start mixes, whether I was just starting.
Do you remember what it was? I don't know if you can say it.
I don't think I should disclose that.
That's fine because it's Tony's business. So yeah, I understand.
It was around $1,000 a mix.
Okay.
Around that, give or take a few hundred, either direction, depending on the
and these are
budget
basically
that was coming in.
Tony's being hired to mix, and you do a lot of the heavy lifting, setting up, starting the mix, getting it to a place where it.
And then the mixes that were coming solely on my own, I was charging between $500 and $1,000 for those mixes at that point, based on the fact that I felt like I had some sort of cosign from Tony.
Oh yeah, you're working under Tony. You're a young guy. Yeah.
Yes. So I would do that. And then 5 years working with him and then moving downtown. That was right after. And again, this story exists on another episode. mixing Macklemore and Ryan Lewis's sophomore album by myself. It was the first time I did a bigger album with a hit song on it.
Downtown was on that record.
Downtown was on that. And it was the first time I did a song without a whole album without Tony. It was just my name on it. And I charged, I think I charged $2,000 a mix for that at that point, $1,500 or $2,000 for that. And then I felt like, all right, that's a good rate for a while. And then that's where I landed there for a bunch of years, and then jumped to the Khalid thing. And then my rate went up from there. And it is about the same, give or take, when there's a deal for a full album. And now with Atmos involved, when we're doing the Atmos mix as well, like I'm just open to negotiating more, but there is a flat rate for one song, including a studio fee that will help cover my assistant and my costs and the time for all the recalls that we have to do. And but it's a flat fee.
Sounds good. So just a quick summation, it really is about, whatever kind of signposts happen, whatever markers happen in your career where like you move from Long Island to work under a big mixer, work with a big mixer. The perception is you're a young guy coming up under Tony Maserati. Oh, you charge a certain
I have more
amount.
Perceived value, right? It's all perception. Exactly.
Totally.
And it's
so
all
it's like,
self,
yeah.
I should say, because your summation is going to be great, but let me just add a couple of things before that, which is these are self-imposed. These are with your manager. If you have a manager, these conversations of, is it time to do this? So, okay, I have a Grammy nom and a top 5 record. Well, maybe I can start being a bit more firm at that, be a little bit less negotiable and stay there. So every A&R or manager or team now knows that like, this is the bottom now. There's a new bottom. So we kind of talk, about bottoms mostly. And then that's a decision that is made amongst the team consensus and self-imposed. And then we see where it lands in the reception of it, right?
So things like cosigns where you're working with some bigger people, whether it's artists or whether it's you're working under a big producer. I mean, I had that with Eric Valentine a bit, where I was getting hired for things, and I had made records that people liked and had a few bands get signed, but because I was Eric Valentine's guy, or that was the perception, there were people that were willing to pay me a third or a quarter or a tenth of what he gets in order, which for me was a huge amount of money to produce major label records. So things like cosigns, things like just having great work. I mean, really, we say this over and over, and we'll get to it. This will segue into another question. Doing great work is far and away the most important thing for all of your business, for all of your success, for all of, you want to collaborate with people. The number one thing that gets all of us work is our work. And of course, there's a bit of the catch-22, which is you don't get an opportunity to work with big artists until you have songs with big artists. But the big thing is if you make great records and people really love them, people will seek you out, because the big artists don't all want to work with all the people that work with the big artists, because there's a handful of people that at any given time are the it people. And a lot of labels will put them onto projects, and a lot of artists will pop artists will do the rounds with the like 5 or 6 different groups of people that are making a lot of the hit records. But a lot of artists are like, I don't want to work with the same people because I don't want my records to sound the same. Who's doing the new interesting stuff that maybe isn't selling a lot, but there's a cool little scene. I mean, right now I'm obsessed with Dylan Brady and 100 Gex and that whole scene, hyperpop. I love this duo, the Frost Children, Aaron Cartier. Like, that's my favorite stuff right now. And it's not selling a lot of records. It's not charting on the radio, but sonically it's the most interesting stuff happening. It's been happening for a few years, and it's iterated from PC Music, who are a bunch of friends of mine, A.G. Cook and Denny Harl and Finn Keen. It was Easy Fun. There's a bunch of cool stuff happening there, but they're not necessarily the ones that are making hit records. But I guarantee you, I mean, 100 Gex played a show in LA, and you see like Benny Blanco posting from the show, and you see Diplo posting from the show. The people that are excited about what's new will find you if you're making the interesting stuff. Right. So that's really important, just making great work. And then, so as soon as you get any of those signposts, that's generally when you can justify large rates. And the other big thing is what you're saying is, once you get a manager, when you have some work coming in and you can find someone who can represent you, there's a thing that just legitimizes a music professional if you have someone representing you doing your deals. And Usually the time, I think we've talked about this before, but usually the time to get a manager is when you know you need one and you have too much stuff coming in and all of a sudden you're negotiating a bunch of things and you're not sure. That's the time where ask your friends, ask your peers who's got a manager, go talk to your friends' managers and just ask for advice. Take somebody for coffee and say, hey, I don't know if I need a manager. You manage my friend's band. What do you think about XYZ? Maybe they'll be the person, maybe they can introduce you to folks, but getting a manager is a big step for raising rates and establishing rates and helping you make those decisions. That's really what a manager is for. At what point in this process did you get a manager?
When I started working with Tony, he introduced me to my first manager. His name was Evan Peters. At that time, I think Evan was working at Capitol as an A&R. He's since bounced around. I love Evan. He was the first manager. And I think Tony wanted someone to handle more of my production side of things, like getting me in writing rooms. And because at this whole time while I'm mixing and Tony's giving me work to do, he is also courting me for a publishing deal and wants me to be
you're
a writer,
still a producer writer.
He saw that. Yeah, at that point. So I had a manager for other things like that. He knew the songwriting world a bit more, being an A&R and working at publishing companies and labels. And that he also understood mixing. He was an engineer as well. So I had him work my mix business as well to keep me afloat while I was doing, all the speculative work that one was doing. And I didn't have a publishing deal at the time. I was just doing sessions so I could, have some sort of repertoire and to show publishers at the right time, which then worked out and turned into a publishing deal. But it just felt like it was the right time. Just like you're saying, I wanted
you need someone to fill a role.
Yeah, I needed someone to fill a role. And I was about to say one more thing about what we were talking about, which is until these points become known to you, whether it's for a rate or pro bono, whatever it is, just fill your calendar. Fill your schedule with things to do creatively, because one of those things is going to be the thing that gets you to the next step that we're talking about here. If you're not filling the calendar and you're just playing video games all day, you're never going to need a manager because there's not going to be enough coming in. Nothing against playing video games. Do both if you want to. But fill your calendar with things, sessions, free work. Find someone that's going to pay you a few $100. You can pay your rent on a couple things, but do the thing you want for passion for free. When you meet someone, you're at Hotel Cafe or whatever, and you're like, this person's great, and she's young artist that has no money, no label. She's just great. Offer to mix her stuff for free. Who cares?
Or can I send you beats? Or can I send you some of my stuff? I love your work. I'd love to work on something together.
It tends to be what goes around comes around. So,
oh man, there's a bunch of things off of that. I also like some of these questions in the chat. The other thing too I wanted to say is that oftentimes, again, we did 2 episodes on business as well, which people should go back and check out. I don't remember which ones are the full business episodes, but again, go on the YouTube and just search Live with Matt Rad Business. We talked for 2 hours about this, but I think oftentimes the main thing that people will need first is an attorney. So once you have deals, you need to negotiate with bands that are on indie labels or putting something out and potentially making money. There are lots and lots of music attorneys that work on a percentage that you can connect through your other friends that make music that will take a percentage and help you negotiate a deal. My first manager was actually my attorney because I didn't quite have enough work to justify having a full-time manager, and I didn't have enough stuff going on, but he was Eric Valentine's attorney and manager, but mostly just an attorney. And so he managed me until we got to the point where I was getting enough work. He's still my attorney, Jeffrey Light, who's amazing. But an attorney is probably the first thing too when people are starting to get rates. Yeah, 25 and 26, we talked about business.
What else you got? You had a segue.
The segue was, and we have a few clips about this. So again, the YouTube, Live with Matt Rad clips. If you Google LA or London, there's a few clips about that. But a few people asked about moving to LA. Andrew asked, as a young producer in Nashville, what things need to be in place before moving to LA. Avaya, who asked me in the DMs a similar question about should she move to Los Angeles. It's a topic that is always going to be asked and always going to be interesting. I left LA a few months ago to be nomadic. I am still, I think, technically nomadic, but I am going to be in LA for these 3 months. And a big reason for that is it's warm and international, except there's now variants and whatever, but international travel has opened up a bit. So I know a lot of people are going to be here in LA. So if there's any time to be in LA for me, it makes sense right now. But as with a lot of these questions that we get, it depends on where you're at and what you're doing. I think a place like LA is great for having lots of people around you to make things with and be excited about making things. But also I made the things that helped me really break in the music industry, I made with my friends in Oakland. And I think especially these, I mean, that was, 20 years ago when I was a teenager. But especially these days, you got the internet, you can connect with lots of people. Certainly there's a value in surrounding yourself day to day with people that are excited about making things, especially if you're like 20, or even if I'm 38, I'm in LA because it's an exciting place to be right now. And it's going to get me excited about making records. But if you can put yourself in a position where you are influenced by the people around you to be inspired to make things, that's going to be better for you than almost any logistical scenario. Flights to LA are cheap. Yeah, I mean, look, LA is a great place. There's lots of people making music. Obviously, the whole world is weird right now, but I think there is a value in being around a lot of different people, but it's not the solution to your problems if you have problems. Like the reality is you got to find a way to be excited and build with the people around you and make great records, not trying to get to the next level and get your foot in the door. That will happen through the process of the majority of your time being spent making great things with your peers and the people around you. So we talked about this before, but it's, that's
great answer. I think the best records are being made outside of LA, and great music is still being made in LA.
Yeah. And that's the truth, is like, flights from Israel to LA are less cheap. Yeah, that's true. Israel's a little bit longer from Los Angeles than, say, Nashville. And, and when somebody asks a question like, I'm a producer in Nashville and what do I need to do to come to LA? There's a lot going on. There's a lot going on in Nashville too. I mean, like, I don't know that it depends. Again, it depends what you're doing. If you're not, there's lots of non-country being made in Nashville, but there's lots of great hybrid country and all kinds of interesting stuff happening there. If you've kind of reached your limit or you want to do other things, come to LA for a couple of months and see what it's like. I mean, that's the other thing, is spend some time and find where you're going to make the best stuff. I mean, we'll get back to what's going to help you make great work. That's kind of the only thing that matters. And I will say that, the first, I don't know, 10 years of my career, but teenage years into my early 20s, all the stuff that got me the most attention was the stuff I did for no money with my friends that we were really excited about. And the excitement made the records great. Because if you're obsessed with something that you're making, that's how you're going to make the best shit. Now, certainly since then, I've played smaller roles in records, or like somebody sends me something and I finish a production and I kind of know what I'm doing already because I've done it a bunch. So I just make it happen. And you've done mixes, mixed big songs that maybe took you a day. But that happens once you've been doing it for a long time and kind of establish yourself. The best way to get your name out there and to have success is to be really excited about the things you're making. That will separate you from everybody else. Okay. Now let's get into some maybe longer. We're already half an hour in. Or half an hour in? No, 35 minutes.
Yeah.
Maybe this is kind of a quick one. I don't have an answer because I haven't done it yet, but I plan to soon. Bobby asked, what does co-mixing look like? Are you still doing much co-mixing? I mean, I know there's Atmos co-mixing kind of stuff.
Yeah, I'm doing Atmos co-mixing completely.
What about regular co-mixing? Is it this?
Haven't. I want to. I've offered it. It's a couple of things that, potentially that will be happening on.
And the idea of that is what? That somebody who's producing it, or maybe the vocal engineer or something like that. I mean, obviously I've talked to Baines and Tizio, and the structure of the straight hip hop stuff is a little different because, like, Chris Brown has Tizio as engineer who also mixes, and Baines has Thug. When they do a song together, they're just throwing sessions back and forth. So that's kind of an obvious co-mix situation. But somebody comes to you where you're like,
for me, it's specific. There's an engineer that's recording everything that the artist has built a trusted relationship with, right? And the engineer is in there every day. This artist wants to work at 2 a.m. and, got to be there on call all the time. And when it's time to finish the record, the engineer is like, wow, I put so much work into this, and I also made it sound like something, but I don't have the confidence to say that this is done yet. Or not even the confidence, just like the know-how to just admit that, like, I've spent so much, I'm so close to these records, but I don't want to throw them to someone that's never communicated with this artist before. It doesn't really work in the world that we work in. It's just this black box mixer that has done so much. So whatever, they must know best. And then everything is thrown out the window for their communication with what has been happening the whole time of the process. So I'm inviting the engineer to come share the credit, and we do it together. Everyone comes up. You now, as a recording engineer, have a mix credit, so you can become a mixer at some point, having that mix credit.
Yeah.
I win because I'm also mixing a record that maybe I would not have had the chance to mix before, because the artist just wants to put the rough mixes out because they're good enough. I'm just trying to make things better than good enough. So it's a way to share. It's a way to have other perspectives come in and no one's work be felt unvalued. Like, oh, well, we're just going to, we still get issues now and then where an engineer or a producer won't want to send stems through the mix bus or something because it's proprietary. I love getting the email and it says, I'm not sending that. It's my proprietary mix bus. It's like, cool. I don't know what that means. I will send you my mix bus template right now in return for yours. Who cares? You want to trade? I'm not very precious about my minor template of plugins or whatever. So people think this is proprietary. Well, let's just share the work. And then let's use a real time example. I co-mix everything in Atmos with Mike Miller at the Atmosphere recently. And, I'll do we'll trade off who's heavy lifting what songs, right? So when I've mixed it, I'm going to probably heavy lift the ones that I've mixed. And then on this album we're doing now, he heavy lifted a couple things that like Manny mixed. And then one of us will throw out an idea and the other one stands up. It's like, you do it. Like, that's how Tony was with me, right? Like, oh, you want to send the vocal around your fucking head because you can in Atmos? You do it. Like, cool. What's your vision? I don't really care who did the good idea as long as the good idea makes the final mix, I am a bit of a control freak when it comes to this historically, but I've changed. I watched the collaboration. I've watched the collaboration with Tony and myself and others, and his openness to just let the best idea win. And it took a bunch of years for me to change that perspective, but I like delegating now. I like to be like, no, that's a cool idea. Like, you do it the way you would hear it. Maybe I'll tweak it after a little bit. Like, maybe I need to filter some bottom because now that it's coming around the head, it's just a little bit weird up in my ears when you put it in spatial audio, but whatever. Like, the idea was the other person's idea. Like, let's just see it through the end. The whole reason for it is the fact that up until the mix process, everything is really collaborative. There's always multiple people in the room bouncing ideas off of each other when it comes to lyrics with the artist, the snare choice, the chords. Everything has like been through the ringer of vetting. And when it comes to the mix, there's just one person in the room just going like, this is how it's supposed to be. It's like, well, it could be another way. So for me, it was a way to socialize the mix process and to make it a bit more collaborative. It's nice. Like, I had a couple artists come through this year. It's very few. The pandemic has kind of changed that. But, artists come through and you can bounce ideas off of them. You could bounce ideas off of any other creative ear that you trust. So that's where it stemmed from for me. And I have not done it as often as I would like to.
It's great. And I think the last thing I will say is that increasingly, if you're younger, you know this already for the most part, but things are just getting more and more collaborative. And if you're the type of person that gets really precious, look, we all have ego, we all have taste, we all want to make things sound a certain way, we're excited about it. But the reality is, the more collaborative you are, you're gonna benefit from it. The more collaborative you are, the better it is for your career. Yes. I think almost across the board. There are certainly scenarios where you want to make sure you get credit and make sure you get paid. One of the reasons to have a manager, have an attorney, that sort of thing. But when you're making things, it's much better to be a part of a collaborative process that makes great records than to spoil that by being like, well, this is my thing, trust me, I have that, you have that, we all have the ego of wanting to make things happen and get the credit because we want things a certain way. But, I think Jay Cash said this, hits not splits. Like, get your name out there, work on whatever gets it to be the biggest song. people aren't going to go, wait, that's a co-mix or that's a co-production.
Nobody cares.
I remember looking at this, and I may have said this on the stream before, but Max Martin, who's maybe the most successful pop writer producer of the last 25 years, I think he's had, it's only Lennon McCartney that he's behind on either top 10s on the Hot 100 or something like that. And by the way, Lennon McCartney was a duo, so all of their songs were the two of them. If you put them separate, Max Martin's got the most. Right. I believe it is the case that not a single one of those hits was he the sole producer or sole writer. There may be one of them, I think maybe Baby One More Time, he wrote that himself, but it was a co-production. But I think maybe it's one out of 60 songs or some absurd number of huge hits.
It's more than that. It's over 100.
They're all collaborations.
It's over 150 he has.
I was gonna say top 10s. But
I still think over 100.
Whatever the number is, it's a lot. It's a lot more than all of us combined. Yeah. But they're all co-productions. They're all co-writes. Like, don't be precious about that stuff. Go figure out how to make the record that is going to be the best possible record. Okay, let's see. This is kind of a fun question because I want to take it in a certain direction. Casey asked, what's a piece of gear you can't live without? If you had to pick one. And, that's such a sort of, we could be snobby about it, be like, well, there isn't one. And we could say, here's my favorite thing. I think the way to answer this question is, we've talked about this a little bit before, but the hierarchy of things. I think the number one thing for me is a great computer that works. The number two thing is monitoring. And for me, the number three piece of gear, because I'm a writer producer primarily, is a great vocal mic. I think it's probably those three in that order. If the computer's not right, if your computer's crashing, if you got pirated stuff or an old OS or the USB thing is sticky and your drive keeps getting disconnected, that's the number one thing, is getting a great working computer so you can make the things. And then I think you'd probably agree, after that it's monitoring so you know what you're hearing. And again, it doesn't mean if you have no money to save up until you can buy the most expensive monitors, but that's definitely the second most important thing for me. And then for me, it's a vocal mic. Do you have past monitoring and computer? Do you have a sort of favorite piece of gear or a favorite thing you like? It's kind of those two. You could probably do it with just a laptop.
Really care.
A laptop and a set of PMCs and you're set.
Yeah, I when I think about my setup, is my favorite setup, which I have a bunch of tube gear that I use, all the same. They're all the same VLCs, EQ, preamp, just to give some warmth to a lot of digital sounds. And I could go to another studio and mix without that, with good speakers. Like, I go mix at Mike Miller's. I mean, he has some of the gear too. He doesn't have as many as I do, but we use them occasionally. When we're doing Atmos, it's a lot of in the box. Except for 16 dB boost of low end on the VT5 burn EQ, which is just insane on bass. But could I live without anything? Yes. This is a longer form answer, but I want to figure out a way to be, if it's possible for me, who is built around comfort. Like, my entire life has been structured in the past 6 or 7 years around what makes me comfortable, then I do the best work in that. So we've talked about the positives of the comfort zone on one episode earlier this year or late last year, that I don't understand the need to always think of being out of the comfort zone. I do my best work when I'm comfortable, not when the song isn't, challenging me or something, but when it comes to mixing, my comfort zone is my space. I want to challenge myself to be a bit more of a nomadic, easier word, mix engineer, which is, I'm jumping out of my sweet spot to do these Atmos mixes at Mike Miller's. Still have amazing PMCs surrounding me. So I'm not that far out of the comfort zone. The room sounds great, but I would like to just be able to go anywhere. And not rely on my space. I don't know if that's possible. I don't know if I need to do that. I don't know why I think that way, but it would be nice to be able to go to Santa Barbara like I love to and mix up there in a hotel room with an attack wall, if I could. It sounds like a lot of work to set up things, but I wouldn't be bringing my gear. So my brain is a bit more wired these days to not be in love with a piece of gear and a necessity. But if I had to answer, the computer doesn't come to mind just because it's so, if you don't have a good computer, what are you doing? Well, it's an important thing you've very important thing. You're totally right. I wouldn't have answered that, but of course that's the most important thing. Yeah. But for me, it's the PMCs. It's a great pair of trustworthy monitoring that has as full band of a spectrum of replication that I could possibly have in a good room. That's really all that matters.
Yeah, and speaking of the gear thing, I think, again, I totally agree, and we don't do exactly the same thing, although I do have a song coming out Friday that I mixed. Don't tell anybody. I'll send it to you, and you can give me criticism on it.
Oh, it's too late.
But yeah, I think beyond computer and monitoring, for me, it's a vocal mic. And when I've been traveling around, I've taken one of my vintage U87s. I have a pair that are very, very close. They're not matched. They were bought separately, but I think I gave them to Klaus Hein years ago, and or gave one of them and gave him the second one to kind of match it. And they sound really, really close. I've taken that in bubble wrap in my backpack. It's the only piece of gear I travel with that's like a piece of gear. I have my laptop and whatnot. But yeah, a really good vocal mic is, I think, when people talk about mic versus preamp and converters and all this other stuff, the microphone is more important than all of it. And all the modeling is fine, but just a great microphone, I think, is my number one piece of gear. What do we got? We got 12 minutes left. You've answered this question before. There's a great clip about it, Live with Matt Rad Clips channel on YouTube. I'm just trying to promote it so people search there because it's great. Yeah, also, as a reminder, as always, we've got LiveWithMattRad.com. If you click on episodes, all of the show notes for all 72, this will be the 73rd conversation, they're all searchable. So people explore that, give us feedback. Bradley, Slow Hand Sound on here, takes great notes every week, and they have links in them, so it's all searchable now. So please go check that out. Check out the website. You've talked about this before. John asked, what are the first things you approach in a mix? Has that changed at all for you? I know you kind of bring up faders, and if I remember correctly, it's really, you kind of go with the low end and the vocal as the primary focus first. Is there anything that's changed for you?
But that's not anything that is that's personal to me. My favorite bits of songs are the vocal and the low end, right? So that's personal to me. We've answered this, I guess, but has it changed? No, it changes every day, Yeah. The other day there was a Kimber record that the verb was so special on the way that it was sent to me, and I went in and treated the reverb first. I was like, how much more can I get out of this space on the vocal? That was the first thing I touched. So I don't know, something that jumps out and calls me to work on, and it's not that's an example of how to bring more life to something that's there, not how to fix something, right? The more chance I have to bring life and color to a mix is the better way to start a mix for me than, this is just a disaster in the upper mids, and I just gotta, this is going to be a struggle now because I have to minimize this so it can translate and sound good and musical and warm and compelling, but also like maintain that energy so it sounds close enough to the rough. It's like that's a different way to go in, but I try to approach with broad strokes, like Joe is saying right here. Make these moves and nothing too specific. Let's
say one of the things I'd say is it's important for people to recognize that when you are bringing up a mix, you have your assistant setting it up such that you are hearing essentially a multi-track version of the rough. So I think that's probably the first thing for a lot of people to do when you are starting a mix. Get it so it sounds pretty close to the rough, so that you have the starting point is where everybody else was hearing it and liking the song. And then the song will tell you, okay, I really need to go straight after this vocal and work on it, or what's going on with the reverb and the space. Let me listen to that first, or this is great, but I know I got to get the low end right. So let me go low end and vocal and start building from there. I think it depends very much, at least when I've had straight mix jobs, most of my mixing is mixing my own stuff. But when I've had mix jobs, it's exactly what you're talking about, which is get it up to where it sounds like what everybody else has been listening to, and then let the song tell you what it makes sense to work on.
Yeah, so when I'm listening back and forth on a rough to where my mix either starts with Josh gets at the start or wherever I get at the start, is the length and the space between notes, parts, the separation, what's causing the glue in someone's rough mix. I'm listening to more of an approach and a style and stylistic choices that were made before me. So what part I work on first is not really the best way to answer this question. It's
figuring out what they're
approach.
after.
Yeah,
what are they trying to accomplish, and how can you approach it your way from their perspective?
Exactly. And that's my job. My job is to enhance what has already been sent to me. So when I think about approach, I would be lying if I didn't say I just jump in right away, because something usually catches me to work on, whether positive or negative. But you should sit and listen a couple of times through the record. Earlier in my career, I did that. I listened without touching. Like, even with Tony, we would sit on the couch and he would do something. Maybe he's snacking on a banana or something, and we'd talk about the record, and we'd sit on the couch together and press play. Like, what is this record? Like, I remember when the Gaga songs came in. I don't even think we listened until the session was prepped. That's another thing for me. I tend to not want to listen to the song until it's prepped. So if I get a spark of inspiration on what to do, I could just jump on it right away. Every once in a while, if I'm really excited, I'll ask the producer if their homie's like, yo, send me a rough. Like, let me bump this in the car before. But I noticed myself being like, fuck, I can't wait to get home and touch that, So when it comes to the approach, listen, try to understand it. And if you're not sure what the approach is, get on the phone with the producer or the artist, right? Like, that's another whole thing. How do we communicate? How do we talk to the people that created what's, coming our way now? And if you can't guess, find out what it is, because that's the best chance you're going to have of completing the task the way that they want you to.
There's two things I want to touch on what you said. One, it sounds like the first thing you approach in a mix, and the first thing we should all do is, we've talked about this before, especially as a mix engineer, there's been so many people and so much process and so much emotion and so much collaboration and probably disagreement and compromise and whatever to get to the point where you're listening to it. The thing you want to do, the first thing you want to do as a mixer is figure out how to be a part of the process that they've already been through. Because you don't want to just...
Where do I fit?
Yeah, where do you fit? What are they trying to do? How can you help that process? Again, collaboration is key, as we're talking about in the chat. Putting yourself in the position where you, as quickly as possible, get a sense of what they're trying to do. That's what really professional people do, is they know how to jump in and go, okay, I see what you guys are doing, let me help. And the other thing, what was the other thing I was just going to say? I don't remember the other thing.
It happens.
Well, I've forgotten.
I mean, 9 times out of 10, 9.5 times out of 10, I understand the reference point. And I truly believe that's why I get hired. I get hired to understand where someone was trying to go with a thing. And if I take it there, then that person comes back and gives me more things to take it there. So when you think about professionalism, that's what gets you rehired, keeps you in the game, keeps you excited about what you're working on, because then you're working on more things that you're good at. The best I feel after a mix is when I've mixed something that I'm like, oh yeah, I was the right person for this gig. Every now and then I get a song, I think we talked about this once, but like, I'll say yes to a whole album sometimes. And like 6 of the songs, I probably shouldn't be the one mixing, but since we've already done a deal, like, I'm still going to do a great job on it because I know what to do, but maybe there's someone better for this. I had a concept early on about having a team of 3 or 4 mixers where there's so much work coming in, like, we're splitting albums and like, oh, well, so-and-so's better at this genre, so this song leans a bit more that way, so we should have that person do it. But that gets kind of sketchy with like, well, they're hiring me, so I'm now divvying this up. Like, I don't know where I fall on the line of that, morally speaking, so I'm still open to that concept of having a mixed team, but I haven't really pulled the trigger on that yet. But I understand the reference points. That's why I'm where I am in my career. I know many genres of music. I understand tips and tricks on how to get there, the things that we don't like to talk about on these shows and conversations and stuff. Like, I'm not going to give tips and tricks out all the time, but I know them. If someone, I have producer friends that say, yo, like, that thing that happened on that record, like, what do you think that is? And I usually know what it takes to get that, or the name of the thing that was used for that, right? That's studying, that's learning. That's like, I was listening to a podcast today about, it's experience. And it's like when you really start to understand something when you have to teach it, right? Yeah. So I could teach mixing, if I really had to. Do I want to like sit there and teach why I do everything? That sounds counterproductive to the actual way to learn and what the important things are. Like when we talk about I want a mentor and stuff, like, I'm not going to sit and tell you why I did a thing the whole time, but I could reverse engineer every move that I make and tell you why I did it if you were to stop me in the move. That sounds counterproductive again, but I could do it. So I understand mixing at a really high level. I understand audio, like certain people understand, like neuroscience or the brain at a really high level. My version of that is understanding what it takes to mix a record. And that's what I'm listening for, is where I slot in with that understanding of multiple genres, multiple decades, and learnings and experience.
Yeah. And as we always
study all of that.
A big part of that is just focused reps, being excited and just doing it a lot. There's no real substitute for doing something over and over and over. The thing I was going to say, which I remembered,
nice.
This is an interesting topic that it could be a short topic, but it's also something we could expand on. We only have a few minutes left here. I think one of the most underrated philosophical things that people do in record making, and the best people do a lot, and everybody below them, less experienced or less successful, I think the best people go on their first instinct, and create situations where the first instinct gets executed quickly. And it was really interesting what you just said, because I think about this with songwriting all the time. The first instinct, the first lyric that comes out with the melody is the vast majority of the time the thing that you should go with, because there's something emotional and subconscious that's happening. And even if it doesn't make the great song, it's much more likely to make the great song. And all of the great songs I've been involved with, they don't necessarily happen quickly in the entirety of the whole record, because sometimes production takes a long time. Sometimes you spend a lot of time refining lyrics or whatever. But the initial burst, the initial emotional thing is almost always a first instinct thing. And some of the best writers I've worked with, if they're not getting lyrics and melody quickly on something, we're just wasting time. Like, why are we wasting time on we don't have a hook and a concept and an emotional core. We should do something else. It's interesting what you said about you don't like listening to a rough mix unless you have the ability to quickly take action on it, which is the mix is set up and you're ready to listen, because that first instinct is so important. I don't know if you've thought about it this way, but I think it applies across the board. It applies to me with production. I spend try to do it early in the morning, or first thing when I get in, is whatever I've been working on the previous night, I'll bring it up and just power through 10 or 15 minutes, because the first instinct in the day of hearing something fresh, I always get great ideas on it. I always edit quickly. I throw the right parts on. I think it's, anyway, the idea of,
well, depending on how you set up your day, have you exercised? Have you meditated? There's a certain time of the day that is the best time for your ears to be working.
That's true,
right?
too.
So,
that's true too. But it can be
mix that with instinct. Yeah. Like that's
so. How did you get to the point where you made that decision of, I don't want to listen to the rough mix until I can work on it? Did you discover that?
Oh, that's a very childish thing. Meaning, I'm eager, like when I hear a song, I want to touch it, right? So that just remained. I've kind of always been that way, because still to this day, we talked about this a lot. Like, it's hard for me to listen to modern music because I feel like I could do better on a lot of things that come out. And I'm not trying to be a dick. It's like when I listen to 60s and 70s music, I don't think I could do better. Like, it's just out. It's live. What am I going to do better in that jazz performance on a live recording at Capitol Studios? There's no way to improve it. So when I hear a record, my first thought is, what can I do to this? And that sounds like childlike to me. It sounds like playtime. This is my way of playing.
Which, by the way, is I think a truism as well. The idea of removing all the context of the craft and the skill, and think about all the things I know and what are the techniques. I always use
we talked about this. I use the same plugins. I don't use any technique. It's like it's all ingrained now.
I always like.
Anyway, you were going to go off on something with body.
I just like the boxer analogy of, whether it's martial arts or boxing or whatever, you work on moving your hips and punching and techniques, but you do it so much in practice, you've done it so much that when you're in the ring, you're not thinking about it. You're just acting on instinct. All the technique is in there. And that's, I think, the best writers, the best producers, the best mixers are people that have built the skills enough through reps and focus that when they are working on instincts, it's that first instinct where the exciting stuff happens, where you're not overthinking and you just make stuff happen. So I just wanted to, I think it's a really interesting topic. I've never connected it to mixing before. It's just really interesting.
Let's talk more about it next week.
Yeah, I'm gonna think on it. Well, we've done an hour.
Talk about instinct. Yeah,
it's good to see you again. It's good to see people back on here. I'm gonna jump on the Discord. Always shout out to the Discord.
Let's hang soon. Let's get some lunch.
I'm gonna hit you up after this. I got a couple ideas.
Cool. Awesome.
All right. Love you, bro. Good to see you.
Love you. Peace.
Bye, guys.